Hello, this is Shreya from GeoBiz Technology. You may have just watched our intro video where we talk about who we are and what we do, but if you didn't, we are primarily an acoustic log processing company. So we take the data from wireline or MWD tools and we process them to determine formation characteristics. The following slides are going to go over in a little more depth than what we talked about in the intro video about our standard capabilities. As a brief recap of our full capabilities, we are able to do a fracture identification from Sonic, and we also have a fast shear azimuth model designed specifically for highly deviated wells. However, those two things will be talked about in a different video, and in this set of slides, we are specifically focusing on the standard capabilities, which we define as our shear anisotropy, slowness, Stoney permeability, and our standard petrophysics. Generally, petrophysicists are looking at discrete intervals when performing their calculations. So the values calculated in interval 1 do not apparently impact the values calculated for interval 2 or 3, and so on. Any errors that may be apparent in these intervals are the same. They seem to be contained within that interval. However, once those values are now integrated into the geophysics model, these discrete, seemingly small errors in slowness, which tie time to depth, compound as propagated through the reservoir model, which can then create errors or differences in the size or characteristics of that reservoir. The most common causes of these errors may not necessarily be the petrophysicist's fault. For instance, they could be using out-of-phase receivers, and receivers can get out of phase just through normal wear and tear of the tool. And their software may not have the ability to interactively track in frequency or in time, so they're using preset filtering parameters that are optimized for the tool and not necessarily for the formation. However, these errors or these causes do contribute to these errors that can affect your reservoir model. The reason the service companies are using a set frequency bandwidth and including all receiver orientations is mostly convenience. You have a field operator computing the slowness for you. He or she has a million things to do, and this ensures that they can provide a standardized and mostly good enough result. And a lot of times it is good enough, but sometimes it isn't, and that can greatly affect other aspects of the business that your geophysicists are taking care of. In contrast, we have a vendor-neutral and tool-neutral software. So the frequency bandwidth that we are using is something that we choose based on the formation and the wellbore. And we are doing a receiver orientation selection because we know that the tool gets banged around and receivers get knocked out, and we don't want to use the bad data, and we want you to receive a result that is true to the formation. In addition, when we're doing our fast shear azimuth modeling, we take into account the fact that it may be a highly deviated well, and the fast shear azimuth modeling used by the service companies is based on vertical wells only. So we are taking that into account in our processing as well. This slide demonstrates our receiver orientation selection. So oftentimes, not all of the receivers are aligned properly. In the picture shown, the waveforms should begin following that red line. However, as you can see, they do not. And so when you use the receivers that are not in phase with the others, this is what leads to subtle differences, or can lead to subtle differences in slowness that propagate to your reservoir models and compounding errors. And the next slide will show you how it affects the actual slowness calculation. This is the comparison in slowness calculated by using all receivers versus simply using the in-phase receivers. To the far left, you will see the caliper and the gamma ray track. And then on the right, on the light green, is the bulk density. Now the slowness should change as the bulk density changes. The black line is showing you a slowness computed with all receivers, and the red line is showing you the slowness computed with only the in-phase receivers. The in-phase receivers, as you can see, tracks with the changes in bulk density much more closely than the slowness computed with only or with all receivers, regardless of whether they were in phase or out of phase. The receiver orientation selection is not the only thing we are doing to achieve a more accurate result. After selecting only the in-phase receivers, in subsequent processing steps, we are also doing an interactive frequency tracking. In contrast, standard processing, as mentioned before, uses only bandpass frequency filtering, which means that the frequency filter is optimized for the tool and not necessarily for the formation. And in reality, the received frequency is determined by the formation, not the transmitter. In addition to that, we are also interactively tracking the waveforms in time so that only the valid signals are retained. We then use a semblance or a stacked correlation for slowness determination, and we compare this result to other available data to verify our results. In the end, this achieves a result that is more true to the formation and is more true to the well that has been logged. And that's an overview of our standard capabilities. If you have any questions about what you've seen in the slides, please feel free to reach out at the contact information pictured. But if you want to know more about who we are, there is an intro video, or if you want to know more about our fracture identification and fast shear azimuth models, there is another video for that as well. So please feel free to take a look at those.